Hi, Andy Schmuckler here. Today is July 23rd. It's just been 2 days since the whole political world changed its climate dramatically with Joe Biden's voluntarily withdrawing from the ticket and recommending, endorsing his Vice President Kamala Harris. Uh, in the last 48 hours, I've written 4 pieces that got overtaken by events. One of them was titled, that I made a video of here yesterday, how Kamala can best earn the nomination that she said that she wanted to earn. And I was still holding on to my idea of what the proper process, what the best process would be. I still think it would have been a good process. But it was a piece that I sent into the newspapers in the early afternoon. And by evening, I wrote back and said I wanted to withdraw uh, that piece because events had just exploded to the point where I could see that what I had to say was really beside the point. It was not only that the train had left the station, but also that what had happened in the wake of Biden's withdrawal and endorsement of his vice president went way beyond anything that I had envisioned and seemed like a really quite adequate substitute for what I was envisioning might happen between now and the end of the convention. So I've written a new piece, which I think won't be overtaken by events. I've given it the title, The Democrats in Array. And it reads, the headline, Democrats in Disarray, is a long-standing joke about the media's habit of seeing the democratic world as failing to get it together. An element of truth stands behind it. Will Rogers famously said, "I'm not a member of any organized party. I'm a Democrat." And pulling the party together is routinely likened to herding cats, all of which makes sense when one considers all the various different groups that make up the Democratic coalition. It is often made the contrast with the Democratic coalition and the Republican world, which is far more homogeneous. But anyway, it's also a case that conservatives and especially right-wingers are people who have much more propensity to get in line, but not to go into that. But this past week, something remarkable happened in the Democratic world, something I didn't see coming. I've written more than a half dozen pieces in the past month laying out how I thought the crisis in the democratic world should be resolved. That crisis, of course, was precipitated by President Biden's stunning incapacity to perform in the June 27th debate with Donald Trump. Two consequences of that disastrous performance plunged the democratic world into turbulence. Many in the democratic world, questioning how capable Joe Biden would be of winning November's election, given how the American people assessed his fitness, were weighed down by a feeling of foreboding. The question of winning weighed more heavily than in any previous election, because the Democrats see that it would be catastrophic for the nation, likely an end to American democracy, if the powers of the presidency were again placed in the hands of Donald Trump. Trump no longer hides his plans to place himself atop an authoritarian regime. Given these unprecedented stakes, I thought two things to be essential: that President Biden voluntarily step aside. Whatever Biden's actual fitness or lack of it, it became clear that with him at the top of the ticket, the party would be dispirited, and with so many of his allies believing he would lead them into an electoral disaster, it was a recipe for defeat. That the right process be devised for selecting the best possible new champion for the electoral contest, with best defined as most likely to win. I campaigned for a particular process that I thought would maximize the chances of victory. A process that would be perceived as fair, not be divisive or chaotic, express the collective wisdom of the party, choose an excellent nominee, and broadcast to the American electorate what they need to hear to save our American republic. My hope was that President Biden, when he withdrew, would propose such a process. But of course, when Biden stepped aside, he also endorsed his vice president, Kamala Harris. My first reaction was that this was too important a decision, given the heritage our founders bequeathed us being at stake, to be made by one person. I feared that such an anointment would fail to empower the party fully enough for this must-win election. As recently as early Monday, I sought a way for VP Harris to earn the nomination, for she had pledged to earn it, or for someone else to earn it in the kind of benign contest I had been promoting. But then I saw that something was happening that I had not envisioned. The Democratic world was coming together behind Kamala Harris with immediate and explosive enthusiasm. It was almost as though a switch had been thrown, and from the base to the leadership, the party became extraordinarily unified and energized behind their new champion. Whole delegations pledged their support. Contributions to fund the campaign set historic records. I changed my mind. The enthusiasm I'd hoped might be achieved by other means was already erupting nationwide through the process that President Biden had initiated with his endorsement. I'd misjudged the situation. The op-ed piece I'd submitted for publication at noon, I withdrew by the evening. In part, I apparently underestimated the esteem Kamala Harris has earned in the Democratic world. In the years since I formed my main impressions of this vice president, apparently, she's grown in a variety of ways that make her more capable, more formidable for the job ahead. First winning the election, and then serving as president, than I had supposed. But mostly, I believe, the extraordinary eruption of democratic fervor reflects the extraordinary state of mind that the democratic world has been in. For a great many Americans, the real possibility of a nightmarish future has weighed heavily on their spirits, as Donald Trump has been showing ever more clearly his intention to use the law to smite his enemies, to commit crimes and call himself immune, to implement Project 25, to make federal employees loyal only to the would-be dictator, etc. Those who see the threat of losing their heritage our founders bequeathed to us have looked to the future with dread. Then, those fears got magnified by the discovery that avoiding that nightmare likely required President Biden to surrender his desires for the good of the nation. That dread got compounded by the fact that only one person could make the decision to change that situation. And it was far from clear that he would do so. After more than 3 weeks of unbearable tension, there came the deliverance. The sudden switch from dread to hope released an emotional and spiritual force that the democratic world has expressed with an upsurgence of passion, commitment, and money. Overnight, the Democrats were in full array. No more that I want to say here tonight. I just want to correct the situation as I saw it yesterday when I made the one about where I was still holding on to my hopes that there would be a contest involving tryout speeches from candidates. Still like that idea, but I don't see it is no longer possible. And it turns out, it seems, that it wasn't necessary. Thank you. Please, if you like this, pass it along to other people you think might like in the social media sense. Subscribe, follow. Check out my writings about much bigger scope of things on a better human story.